Sure, sure.
It's not really required.
Oh,
Okay.
no chewing.
Let's get started. I'd like to welcome everyone to the June 4th, 2025 Cottonwood Heights City Planning Commission work session. On the business session agenda for later, we'll talk about each of these items is hearing and potential action. Nope, not that one, sorry. To talk about the zoning text amendment, and actually the zoning text amendment on work life, and then to talk about moderate income housing report. But before we dive into any of that, we would like to welcome a new commissioner.
Thank you,
Rusty.
thank
Rusty,
you.
look, Mike,
Yeah,
do you
so,
wanna?
yeah, the city council appointed Rusty Lugo as we're now back to a full commission. Rusty will be the alternate commission member. So able to participate in all deliberations and discussions. If the rest of the commission is here, he won't vote, but if anyone is absent, then he's a voting member. So glad to have Rusty.
Yeah.
Maybe take a minute, introduce yourself, and then we
Thanks.
can go around and introduce everyone else.
Wonderful, thanks, Mike. It's very good to be here. My name's Rusty Lugo. And grew up here in West Jordan on the west side there. And I remember when my Uncle Pete bought a house up here on Dolphin Way. I was like, wow, we'd commute up to the east side. It was big time. And I said, maybe one day I loved the neighborhood. And now I live right across the street and just enjoy being a part of the community. And want to thank Sean for introducing me to Mike, and happy to be here and ready to learn, because that's what it's all about. So yeah, that's all.
Great.
Well, welcome. Let's just do quick introductions, and I'll start. Lucy Anderson. I'm District 3. I mean, just so you kind of know where we're all from. And I'm in my second term on the planning.
Thanks, Lucy.
Glad you're here.
Thanks.
Dan Olson. I'm really not sure who I represent. But I guess it's okay because I'm in my first term. I'm still learning.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. Dan, right?
Right.
My name is Gary Barnes. I'm relatively new also. This is my 5th meeting. And I also want to apologize to you in advance. I had the audacity to steal your packet.
Oh, you did. I'll let it slide this one.
Oh, thank you. I'll ask for your forgiveness.
My name is Mike Shelton. I represent, guess the same way, District 1.
Okay.
And we'll see if I get appointed to a second term.
I'm Mike Smith. I'm also in District 1, I believe, at large, or whatever that means. I'm still in my first time around with this. Still feel like I'm new at this, but I'm running out of that excuse.
Yeah.
Anyway, and if you need to guess anyone's name, go with Mike or Dan. You'll probably get it right.
Get pretty close.
And a Gary to my left.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
you've got 2 Dans and 3 Mikes.
Okay.
Dan Mills, I'm the other Dan. I like that. You be the main Dan, I'll be the backup Dan.
I'll be the senior Dan.
I love this work and the city and the things that this group has been about. I think there's a strong attempt to make things pretty apolitical and trying to do what's best for the residents of Cottonwood Heights. And so even though we come from districts, these are not fiefdoms to be represented. We've been, I think, with Lucy's leadership and her predecessors, tried very hard to make sure that we really do look through that lens. This is not a pro or anti-developer group. We just ultimately try to make it best for the future of Cottonwood Heights. So welcome.
Sounds great.
In my second term, and just I've the chance to make a difference in the city. And our staff, I'm not trying to belay this point, but we have an amazing city staff that could work lots of different places and choose to work here. And I'm grateful that we have who we have, and they need to be thanked more regularly by more residents, I believe. So
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Right?
Dan.
There's Mike and Dan.
That's right. I'll take mine.
Thanks, Dan.
We don't need any. of that. I'm here to support the city in any way that we can. So.
Let's go. Let's go out
Staff
all the way
quick? Yeah.
around the room.
I'm Alex, I'm IT. Nice to meet you, Alex.
Dana Brummel, I'm the deputy recorder and HR.
Got it, okay, nice to meet you.
I'm Ian Harris. I'm one of the planners that works with Mike. I've emailed you.
Yeah, okay,
Nice to
yeah,
meet you
thank
first.
you, appreciate that, yeah, thanks, Ian.
And I'm Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Great. Thank you and welcome again.
Thanks, Lisa.
We'll start with the continuation of our discussion about work life and
Yeah.
neighborhood commercial.
Thank you. I will first start by just updating the commission. You saw the letter I sent out regarding the conditional use
Thank you.
permit for the church. The applicant reached out after we distributed the packet and withdrew their application. So it's still on the agenda because the agenda was already published, but that has been withdrawn. So when you get to that item, we can just note that it's been withdrawn and move on, but they've requested for that to be closed out and not consider any further. So won't be moving forward with that application anymore. So the other two items then are just city initiated requests. The first one being the live work text amendment. What's in your packet is actually the same thing we discussed at the last work session. I'll bring it up. And then we've just created a kind of a track change version of that that will move on to city council. So I'll go over that again. I'll provide just some brief context for our new commissioner. In February, the city council issued a moratorium on live work applications within the neighborhood commercial zone. That is valid for up to 180 days or about 6 months. What that does is halt any live work applications within the neighborhood commercial zone to give time for the city to better define and create regulations related to what live work actually means. There's a lot of context there. I'd be happy to catch you up offline on how this came to be, but that was the original decision that prompted this. So once that moratorium was imposed by the city council, staff got to work trying to create an ordinance to resolve and better define what live work meant in the neighborhood commercial zone. Brought an original version back to the planning commission, got some great feedback from the commission there. Came back again with what you see in front of you and what was discussed last time. I'll just go through those briefly and then just turn it back over to the commission for questions. But this only applies within the neighborhood commercial zone, which is the only zone that specifically lists live work use as an allowed use type. What we've done is clean up the various uses within those zones that create some confusion or would create an ability to propose a project that would be, would maybe bypass the intent of the zone to provide some sort of neighborhood scale commercial. I think there was some concern that it may be used as a tool to just build purely residential developments, which in itself is not necessarily a bad thing, but when compared to the intent and the definition of neighborhood commercial, seem to be a little bit out of line with the intent of the zone, which is to create a balance of uses and neighborhoods scale commercial opportunities. So what we've done is eliminate the residential predominant uses that are currently listed in the neighborhood commercial ordinance. Bed and breakfast, home occupation, home preschool, planned unit development, which is just a residential subdivision, residential facilities for elderly persons, and then live work spaces. What we've also done is eliminate or modify an existing term in there that was mixed residential housing and kind of rebranded that and proposed a new use type called neighborhood mixed use. What this will do is add an allowance for residential housing, but only as a component of a neighborhood mixed use project. So that was kind of clarifying what types of uses were allowed. We've established a definition for what neighborhood mixed use means. I'll read it here. A single building containing more than one land use type, at least one of which is residential, or a single development of more than one building in use, one of which is residential, where the different types of land uses are in close proximity, planned as a unified complementary whole and functionally integrated to the use of shared vehicular and pedestrian access and parking areas. So that's a typical mixed use definition. Whether the uses are mixed within one building or multiple buildings within the same project, there's some flexibility there. That definition has been added not to neighborhood commercial, but to the definitions section of the ordinance. So that lives in general definitions now. But the only place neighborhood mixed use will appear as a use is going to be in neighborhood commercial. We've then, rather than putting standards within the definition, created some additional draft standards that will be codified within the neighborhood commercial chapter. And will live specifically in that chapter because that's the only place the use will exist.
Can we go back for just a
Yes,
second? I have this thing eating at my brain. Is there a reason that that definition does not say at least one of which is commercial? It seems like that's more in fitting with what, in keeping with what we're talking about here. At least one of which is commercial
Yeah, we could do that.
would make more sense to me.
You mean to replace residential?
At least one.
The word residential in both, it's two places there, but
I think the intent was to say if you want to do residential in the NC, it has to be here, but we could, yeah, we could do that.
We removed residential from the definition with.
Or we could say at least one of which may be residential. There's a number of ways to do that, I think, but yeah, open to suggestions though.
okay, sorry.
I think the idea is we will have all of the other uses in the neighborhood commercial zone. They're all commercial or non-residential in their nature. If you want to add a residential element, the neighborhood mixed use is the only way to add that. And you have to do that in addition to having commercial use. So we could even,
If you said maybe, I think that would,
okay. Or we can say, you know, at least one of which must be commercial and or non-residential, and at least one of which must be residential.
maybe.
Maybe residential, yeah. Yeah, okay, we'll do that. Okay, take a note down. Good comment. Okay, and then we've created the draft standards. And what we've said there is, for a neighborhood mixed use project, all neighborhood commercial development standards pertaining to building height, setbacks, landscaping, coverage, you know, parking, buffering, you know, screening, all of that applies as normal. Whether it's a fully commercial use, a different use of the chapter, or a residential, a neighborhood mixed use project, the NC development standards apply as it relates to massing and setbacks. The mix of uses shall be consistent with the permitted and conditional uses, which, as we know, is only conditional uses in the neighborhood commercial zone. That's basically saying one may be residential, the other uses on the site have to be listed as an allowed use within the neighborhood commercial zone. Can't go outside that set of established allowed uses.
How do you get to residential in that list of uses? Is there one that's still residential?
In the definition. And maybe we can just further clarify there. And say one of which may also be residential. And then we're saying the non-residential portion of a neighborhood mixed-use project shall constitute a minimum of 25% of the total gross floor area of the entire unit or project square footage. And then at least 50% of the unit or project frontage at ground level along a public right-of-way shall be dedicated to the non-residential portion of the project. As we discussed, this is making sure there's a good balance between the commercial use and the residential use on a project, and also making sure that the commercial use is prominently featured and accessible to the public from the public right-of-way. So it's not a token office in the back of a residential development.
I have a question,
Please.
please, Mike. Are these quantifiables consistent with other similar city standards?
Yeah, so we did cast a broad net of other definitions of live, work, and mixed use and things like that. And these numbers kind of came from those definitions. So it's not, super scientific research, but it is at least backed up, and there are other cities that have these general standards.
Okay.
We felt requiring more of a commercial presence may not be supported by the commercial market in everywhere that a commercial zone exists. A site can only handle so much commercial, especially in a residential area. So 25%, as long as it's focused on the public right of way, we think makes the most of that.
Okay.
Another weird
Thank you.
question here, the frontage, if you pick the project that brought this up, what is the frontage on the private road considered frontage?
We've said public right of way, ground level along a public right of way. Now, in that project, that was a corner lot, so there are two public right of ways that project had frontage on. It could be either there, but we are clarifying that it's adjacent to the public right of way, not like an internal driveway.
So some of those units had no frontage by that definition, right?
Correct. So that previous configuration probably wouldn't have worked. I mean, we didn't do a review, but probably wouldn't have worked with this new definition. And then lastly, while not directly a result of the moratorium, we recommended a few other kind of modifications and cleanups to the neighborhood commercial chapter while we're in there. We have some standards here for minimum lot sizes, minimum lot widths, and minimum lot depths. We don't see that in some of our other commercial zones, especially our mixed use zone, where you have pretty substantial setbacks and height and parking and landscaping, all these other standards. We are proposing that we eliminate the minimum lot size and width and depth requirements, and instead let those other standards dictate how large a site or a parcel needs to be able to support a specific development. When you think about it, the larger the building, the more commercialized it is, the more parking it's going to need. It will kind of regulate itself in making sure that a building can fit on a site. So I don't think we're going to see any huge unintended consequences here. But one thing we do see, like say across the street from the Wells Fargo building, the Smith Shopping Center is neighborhood commercial, and they've gone in and condominiumized, units within that shopping center and kind of created lines more for ownership than anything else. But if you have these hard lot size requirements, it makes some of those ownership divisions and condominiumizing a little tricky, where you're drawing kind of arbitrary lines to meet zoning.
You're too
Sorry,
strong.
sorry.
It's okay, it's a weapon.
Coming after you.
I feel like it does a good job of getting us to move towards shared parking and not that we're gonna facilitate those arrangements, but
Yeah.
this idea that we only want the building envelope to just, be in the center. And then I just think commercial buildings can do more creative things in shared parking circumstances.
Sure.
And this, I think, opens us up for, that main floor piece to be able to be potentially a little more expansive in the right circumstance with the residential up above, and allow us to use the spaces that are conducive to this throughout the city.
Yeah. Yeah, and another kind of counter protection to this, to removing the minimum lot size, is in neighborhood commercial, if you're adjacent to residential, the setback's greater. If you're adjacent to something else that's commercial, it's less. So again, it kind of regulates itself in that regard. And then modifying the height requirements. Our ordinance right now says maximum height is 2 stories or 35 feet, whichever is less. It's a little unique. We don't do that in any residential zone. We don't care as much about stories as we do about maximum impact and visual impact. So we are just recommending saying a maximum height of 35 feet and calling it good. That's consistent with many of our other zones today. So, and then in your packet, we've gone through again and just redlined or did a track changes version showing all of those things. And I think one thing we mentioned, and I will make sure gets added, is saying, home occupations are allowed in any residential area right now, multifamily, single family, wherever. You can do a home office really anywhere in the city. So as long as the commission supports it, would propose we add, one more clarification that within the residential portion of a neighborhood mixed use, you may be eligible for a home office license there.
I think this hits the intent of the neighborhood commercial live work in such a beautiful way. So good work on putting this together.
I agree,
Love it.
100%.
That clarity is huge.
The one thing we talked about, again, that's not in here, but certainly, we have some time tonight to discuss it, is whether there are any obvious conditional uses that the commission thinks should be moved to permitted uses, or if maybe that's a separate undertaking that we come back with later. The main impact being any conditional use is required to go through planning commission approval. A permitted use doesn't. Still needs site plan approval from the planning commission, but doesn't need specific use approval. It is a little unique to have a zone with 0 permitted uses and everything conditional.
What would you say the primary calls that you get on neighborhood commercial for request of use?
We don't get a ton of requests for neighborhood commercial because we don't have a ton of projects in that zone. Prior to the live work proposal, it's usually office, dental or medical office buildings that are interested in using those.
As a staff, what would you recommend to allow for permitted use in neighborhood commercial?
Yeah, that's a great question that I'm not prepared to answer. So I would say if we want to get into that, we can come back with that.
Okay.
I just, didn't know if there were any thoughts on something obvious here.
I think my thought would be that I don't want to piecemeal the permitted use piece of it. I think it's a great idea, but I think we maybe want to have a little more discussion about it, and also want to make sure we provide to council what they were looking for in terms of the definition or refining that.
Sure.
So
Yeah,
I think
sure.
I'll just reiterate what I said. I think outstanding job on this. It was.
I agree. I think it looks great.
Yeah.
One addition maybe, I think you don't have a mixed use conditional use. So I think that all the mixed use concept is difficult because you can't get there with the permitted conditional uses. As I look at
Oh,
it.
so we need to add it. Yeah, we
we've
just need
taken
to add
it-
neighborhood mixed use. In the
Yeah,
mixed
and-
use table. Huh? That was an oversight. That should be in there. Yeah, that was intended.
So it sounds like the two updates, adding that is the.
It's there. It's
Oh,
right
it's
there.
right here.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
It just looks like it's.
Oh.
It's there after the red.
Is there a definition of neighborhood mixed use anywhere?
That's
We
what we're
created,
proposing to adopt
right?
in our
Yeah.
definitions chapter.
Oh, right here.
And that's where we were gonna add your clarifications of, one of which may be
Maybe.
residential.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Good eyes.
I was like, I did that.
You got the youngest eyes in the room.
Oh,
so.
yeah. Wow.
Any other thoughts on the new and the updated? I think it provides a lot of clarification and.
I think this is exactly what we were seeking in this proposal, so good work,
I
truly.
We got one public comment on this after the deadline, so we'll send it along.
Okay.
I did let that individual know this will go on to city council, so there will be multiple opportunities to share input. Okay,
Did it go to the July council?
yeah, I mean,
Oh,
it
it
could,
has.
yeah.
It was up in moratorium, right?
I think the moratorium's up in, I think we have a little more time, but we try, if we can work through it,
Yeah, no,
to
give it.
get that lifted as soon as possible. So we'll just keep it moving, as soon as the commission votes on it. Okay,
Awesome,
great.
thank you.
You're welcome.
The next item is to talk about moderate income housing report.
Yes. You. Open here. Sorry. There you go. All right, so this is the 2025 moderate income housing report plan. You call it a number of different things. This is a state mandated plan or compliance report that must be submitted by every city in the state. Every 5 years, cities are required to actually update their plan. And then the years in between, they submit annual reports. Now, the state legislature kind of tweaks this legislation every year, so that's kind of the framework, but then it changes a little bit every year, it seems like. So we are now at year 5 of needing to come in and actually update our actual plan. But there are still a lot of parameters on how the plans must be written, exactly the language that needs to be used and what needs to be in it. So the formatting doesn't look like a typical master plan we do. It's much more kind of technical in nature, and that's just due to that reporting requirement by the state. So I'll just run through this quick. And this needs to be, as it says here, so state code requires every municipality to submit a plan and submit progress reports. We are on year 5, so we're in front of you with an actual plan. The annual reports now do not come to planning commission. So this didn't come in front of you last year because we were just reporting on our previous plan. New city master plans or reports need to be adopted and submitted to the state by August 1st each year. And then in the state code, there are 26 options that cities are allowed to select from. It's like a menu of moderate income housing options that are defined and designated by the state. And if we say we want to choose this option, but we write it wrong, they tell us we're out of compliance. You have to copy it exactly as written in state code. We must adopt a minimum of 3 state-defined housing strategies, including implementation plans for them. We may adopt up to 5 strategies, or at least 5 strategies, to then be eligible for priority road funding from Transportation and Investment Fund, which we haven't tapped into a ton here with the city, but 5 strategies makes us eligible for potential priority funding. So we've identified 5 that we recommend adopting.
Are we thinking of using some of those transit details for Hillside?
But like the HTRZ things, no, because that won't be, that wouldn't be qualified as a high transit rail zone or whatever they call them. The gravel pit may, because that, the bus hub that's being constructed there, that may, then we'd have to go back in and update our plan. But so I'll show you what options we've chosen and recommended at least. There are various approaches to this. There's a lot of pressure on local municipalities to do their part, but there are, I think this is an all hands on deck issue that no one quite has the perfect answer for, and there's probably not a perfect answer for it. But making a dent in this moderate income housing challenge is not solely a local issue, but we have our role to play in that. Just for context, what is affordable or moderate income housing? By definition, that means if your housing is affordable, it means your total household costs are no more than 30% of your gross household income. So 30% is kind of the threshold. If your housing costs, and that's mortgage and utilities and everything related, are 30% or less of your total gross income, then you're considered to have housing that's affordable to your income. Moderate income housing then is housing that is affordable, so doesn't exceed 30% of total gross income, to households that earn 80% or less of area median income. So area median income here is different than it is in Murray and Mid-Valley Holiday. So every city's area median income is a little different. And these plans are based on your area's median income. But 30% is affordable housing, and then we are targeting providing housing options at 80% or less of AMI. These numbers may even be a little outdated now. They're from late 2024, but area median income in Cottonwood Heights is $116,500. So that's your area median income that will be
household income.
Yeah. Yep.
Are we going off of Freddie Mac's numbers on this?
No, this is it's a bunch of different data sets. It's community profile data and census data, and kind of aggregated by the group that helped us prepare the report. So at that rate, affordable monthly housing costs would be just shy of $3,000 at area median income. 80% of the AMI is $93,000 or $2,300 a month in housing costs. So that's just to kind of show you, give you a frame of reference for what affordable, by definition, would be considered in Cottonwood Heights. Importantly, other affordability bands can be targeted and arguably should be targeted. 80% is considered moderate income housing, but you know, there are households and needs for housing within lower affordability bands as well. So you get into your 30% AMI, you're very low income households, 50% AMI, which would be more of a low income household. And, you know, you see the largest deficit at those lower rates because housing is difficult to provide, in an affordable way to those low income households.
And the motivation of the state is to just assure affordability. in-
Yeah, I mean, housing costs rise and rise and rise. I've got a median home cost in here, and our finance director at city council last night reported that now it's over $800,000 in Cottonwood Heights. So,
805, right?
yeah, something like that. So yeah, obviously an issue there with how the housing cost is rising, you know, continually and income and things like that not keeping up. And a lot of that's the nature of Utah and supply and demand and, you know, a lot of demand and not a lot of space to build housing. And, you know, a lot of factors go into that. City population is just shy of 34,000, so 33,594. That's actually a decrease of 0.5% from the most current census to the one before. I think that there's a number of factors there, but that may speak to family sizes and just kind of trends in some of those demographics. Projected city population by 2050 is 41,000, which is not a ton of growth over the next 25 years, but you know, just projected to increase just based on regional demand for growth spread out over the various areas in the state.
How can we grow in that front with the infill
Yeah,
development opportunities? And I mean, we don't have any large scale, so
right.
that projection, is it basing off of just state growth, or is it basing
It's-
off of?
It's partly on state growth and just, you know, inflationary projections divided out by areas. It's also based on like Wasatch Front Regional Council, regional master plans. And in those, we've got some growth areas, mainly the gravel pit. And, you know, your Union Park centers that have kind of those higher capacity, whether it's ever housing or not, you know, the plans don't go into that level of detail. But I think to your point, though, it means growth opportunities in Cottonwood Heights are probably limited to these infill opportunities, a couple large redevelopments, town center, gravel pit, you know, things like that here and there. But we don't have the massive growth and expansion that many other cities in kind of the southwest quadrant have. A median age in Cottonwood Heights is 39.1. That's fairly high. The county median age is 33. Utah as a state is 31. So higher median age. Percentage of constrained households, and that would be households whose income compared to housing costs that doesn't hit that 30% threshold or over. Their housing costs are more than 30% of their annual income. 29% roughly of owner occupied households are in that constrained category. Yeah, I mean, like I said, median income is 116,000, quite a bit higher than the county median income, and then median home cost of 770.
You keep track of average household size?
I
mean,
yes,
in human beings, not in. Yeah.
that data is out there. I don't know that it's in this report, but we do. You know, the family size is shrinking. I think, you know, it's 1.8 children on average right now, you know, which is low in Utah compared to what it has been in the past.
You wonder though, if you have a lot of twos, and you know, a lot of mom and dad are still at home, but
Yeah.
nobody else.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good question. And, you know, maybe more anecdotally than anything, we do hear a lot like, oh, children grew up and they're looking for a place and, you know, they can't find a place nearby.
Yeah,
and
they're
they
still
want to, and,
Yeah,
you know,
still there.
you get some of that, right? The empty nest isn't actually empty. The housing consultants do a great job. They get into the weeds with some of this data, and a lot of it's kind of complex and hard to interpret. So here's some just fairly straightforward ones to just show kind of a housing profile in the city. We did one, ask them for the age of housing structures in the city. You can see the almost half of the housing stock in the city was built between roughly 1960 and 1980, which helps inform, hey, you know, some of the some of those housing products are going to need reinvestment over time, 40, 50 years is kind of that life cycle, if they haven't been kept up. And then you can see a lot built from 1980 to 2000, another quarter. You've got a pretty good chunk after 2000 and a few that are even older than the 60s, but that just shows kind of the breakdown of when housing was built. Occupied housing types in Cottonwood Heights. This table breaks it down a little kind of in an odd way, but you can see single family housing is the predominant housing type. In 2023, that was about 80% of the available housing type in Cottonwood Heights. Rather than break down, I don't know that it's super important to know the difference between 3 to 9 units and 10 to 19 and 20 plus, but your more conventional multifamily is, about 15% of the available housing type in the city. Duplex, twin home, kind of the 2-unit housing type is pretty low, just, about 2%. And then renter versus owner, we're 71% renter or owner occupied housing, 30% then, 29% renter housing. Both of those, the percent owner occupied is a little higher than the county average, but we're in the ballpark. What's interesting though is the amount of multifamily housing units is there's a lot of multifamily housing units, but not a high percentage of renter occupied. Then we go into, this is more of a rental statistic at the top here, the deficit in each affordability band, I'll call it. So 30% AMI there on the left, that's a $30,000 annual income. This data is consistent, across most cities in Utah. There are not a lot of housing opportunities that are affordable to households at 30, 40, 50% AMI. That's a really challenging product to create. So you can see that the biggest deficit in housing for rental households is in those lower affordability bands. We actually have a slight surplus of units at 80% AMI, rental units at 80% AMI or greater. But again, 57 units, that shows we're just barely breaking even there. And then a deficit in those lower bands. And I'll show you in a minute, we're actually, making some progress here to chip into some of this for some of these lower affordability ranges. And then this just shows a breakdown of household income versus, what that affordable housing price is and how much of of that product is available. So you can see here, we have a lot of housing product affordable at those high income, well above median income. And then we see our gaps at the lower household incomes, which is, again, not surprising. Okay. So that's just background to just kind of snapshot of where the community is right now. Again, I don't think that is a huge surprise to anyone, just given Cottonwood Heights and the fact that it's built out and, housing, it's an area that's in high demand and not a lot of space to build a housing product. Our current defined strategies, we have 4 currently, are shown on the screen here. Create or allow for or reduce regulations related to accessory dwelling units. Zone or rezone for higher density or moderate income residential development in commercial and mixed use zones. Near transit corridors, commercial centers, or employment centers. So maybe, Sean, this does get a little bit to your point. Implement zoning incentives for moderate income housing units and new developments, and then demonstrate a moderate income housing set aside for any community reinvestment area or RDA projects that a city may have. These are the current strategies we've been reporting on and trying to make progress on since 2020.
Really quick.
Yeah.
Our current RDA or CRA zones that we have, is it just Hillside Plaza or is there?
Canyon Center is the one that's active and collecting tax increment right now. Hillside Plaza, our town center, is a project area, but there's no budget, so we are not collecting any increment there. Canyon Center actually preceded the requirement for these areas to have a affordable housing set aside, so there is none in that one. If and when tax increment financing is triggered for the town center area, that will have to have an affordable housing set aside. And then the other one that is kind of on the radar of the council that, we're kind of ready when the developer would be ready would be the gravel pit. So recent progress towards these four goals. Our planned development district, our PDD projects have a requirement, and you've seen this as a commission, that they give a developer, a landowner, a ton of development flexibility, a lot more density potential, a lot more intensity than if you just use standard underlying zoning. There are some trade-offs to that, though. One of them being, if you have a large multifamily component to these PDD projects, a percentage of those have to be deed restricted affordable units. We have two projects. One is fully complete. Certificates of occupancy are issued. It's in operation now. One is just an entitlement. ICO at Fort Union is the one that's complete. That's over on the very western edge of the city. You can kind of see it from the Union Park on ramp there. 200 residential units there, 10% of which are deed restricted and affordable to households at 50% AMI or less. We get reports from them quarterly, verifying that they are renting those affordable units to qualifying households. Seems to be working really well. They're always occupied. And then we have the Northern Gravel Pit project, the Wasatch Rock project, which was in front of you recently to kind of finish that entitlement process. They have 600 total entitled residential units between apartments and condos there. Their approval required that 15% of those units are affordable at or below 80% AMI. So that's about 40 total units in that project that will be, they're entitled, they're not built yet, but will be deed restricted affordable to households at or below 80% AMI. And then we have a few market examples. Santa Fe Apartments, not because of any city regulation, but they have areas in their development that have deed restrictions and require income qualifications. They have 65% AMI and 50% AMI units within there. Actually, a big chunk, over a quarter of their total units are deed restricted to qualifying households in some way. To the ADU goal, we permit internal ADUs. We have a process to allow detached ADUs. We have actually most, I think with the exception of regional commercial, all of our commercial zones allow residential use to some extent. And that would include the pending form-based code as well. We have one community reinvestment project area, the town center, that if and when triggered will require a moderate income housing set aside. We also have two old, they're called EDAs, economic development areas, that predated the city that have some remaining budget in them. Another option would be to take some of that budget and invest that into like an affordable housing fund as well.
Were those specific sites?
They are. One is the Union Park Office Center down by Trader Joe's and 1300 East, the office buildings there. And then the other one is the Old Mill or the Cottonwood Corporate Office Center on the eastern edge of the city. Now, pulling a set aside out of that and investing that in affordable housing doesn't have to be within those areas. You can invest into a regional fund that would fund affordable housing in our, in the broader region. It doesn't even have to be necessarily in Cottonwood Heights.
Have they already tapped out just because of the development?
No, we are in the point now where we can't hold on to those excess funds for forever.
Yeah.
So we're in the process now of budgeting how to use those funds, and we'll be recommending that a portion of those be invested in affordable housing. And then we have our Wasatch Choice vision plan, our planning areas. This just shows where we anticipate growth and development over time. And you can see here, our most intense envisioned development, the gravel pit, the Union Park area, and then you've got, the town center, Highland Drive, 1300 East areas. Again, this speaks to, we have limited growth and new development potential. It's a lot of infill. Infill doesn't always create a whole, excess of new housing units. It's just kind of a one-to-one replacement typically. But we do have some opportunities, to implement some mixed use development over time as these areas warrant redevelopment, along Fort Union at our gravel pit in our corporate center, and at some various neighborhood scale centers as well. We then, as part of this plan, now we're getting to the actual point, are proposing to continue reporting on those same four strategies. In reading through the menu of options and just seeing as how we're just getting the ball rolling and making progress towards some of these with our PDD projects and other things, we think it's prudent to continue with the 4 that we've been reporting on and add a 5th, and that one would be reducing, waiving, or eliminating impact fees and actually development fees in general to moderate income housing projects, or to elements within projects that include, deed restricted affordable housing units. The number of ways to do that, and we'd want to make sure that's calculated properly, but that's what we're requesting as adding or proposing to add as our 5th strategy. In addition to identifying strategies, we have to now quantify implementation measures, how we'll report on this, when we'll report on this, when we intend to make progress on it. So we've laid that out in the report as well. The first strategy is ADU allowance, continue to monitor ADU licenses each year, continue, making sure the public is aware that it is an option for them if they're interested. Another strategy would be to research other cities' ADU standards and consider ordinance amendments to make the process a little easier. We haven't seen a huge uptake in ADU licenses, and that may just be a preference thing. That may be because people aren't aware. That may be, maybe some of the standards are a little too strict. Particularly as it relates to detached ADUs. It's a very rigid ordinance right now to develop a detached ADU. You have to have a very large lot, a very unique circumstance. You come through planning commission, it's a whole process. We've only seen 2, I think, since we've had this legislation. So that would be one area to see, is there a willingness to revise that policy, and are there things we could do to make that process easier? And then another one that we thought was kind of unique would be to develop a card file system for ADUs and actually potentially new homes, where the city would invest in actually pre-engineer building plans for ADUs and maybe, certain smaller homes, so that a property owner that wants to build some of these things does not have to go to the expense or the process of hiring an architect and engineer. They'd have to do some site planning and make sure it's designed properly and sited properly in the site, but it could reduce a barrier to preparing plans. The next strategy, again, allowing residential density in commercial areas. It's an existing goal that we're proposing to continue. I've talked about the PDD projects. So 600 total new units have been entitled in these 2 projects. 81 of which will be deed restricted affordable in some way. And again, for a city that's largely built out, those are pretty good numbers in my opinion. We're showing, hey, we are making progress here. It's not all market rate units. We're trying to chip away at this issue. Continue to track the number of moderate income housing units in developments, not only in the PDD projects, which have a reporting requirement, but also in other areas along commercial corridors. And then going back, kind of like we're doing with neighborhood mixed use with neighborhood commercial, ensuring that mixed use housing options are properly codified, defined, and regulated in our various non-residential zoning districts. So kind of going through that same exercise in our other commercial zones and making sure, the standards that are there are good, and if not, proposing something. And then finally, identifying development strategies to utilize private resources, public-private partnerships, other regional programs to implement housing-friendly goals. And this could be, right-of-way projects that increase access to transit, if there's an interest in that increase active transportation infrastructure, pedestrian mobility, things like that. They're tangential to housing, but often when you see, affordable housing and higher density housing, you have amenities that are conducive to not having to rely on an automobile. So trying to start broaching that topic. That's kind of the longer range goal there. Next one, zoning incentives for affordable units. Our PDD also does this. Again, the trade-off, as I said, is yes, this is one of the asks of the city, is providing affordable housing. In exchange, you get, especially in like the gravel pit, pretty much unlimited development potential to propose. You have a ton of creativity with which to plan your development. So we feel that's a fairly fair trade-off. We would anticipate the larger portion of the gravel pit will take advantage of this ordinance as well, which will provide another substantial opportunity to kind of look at, among many other things and many other things that development site will provide, the housing element of it and making sure there can be an affordable housing provision there. Continuing to track development projects using incentive tools, that's our PDD reports. And then identifying local financial incentives for development of targeted housing types. There are a ton of state options that all have some sort of affordable housing set aside or component to them. And they're all acronyms, and I just thought it was kind of funny to list them all out here without context. The first one, FIZ, is First Home Investment Zone. That's a new legislative tool that allows for the creation of deed restricted for sale units. That's an option we could pursue. HOPS is Home Ownership Promotion Zone or something like that. It's very similar to the FIZ, but just created through a different legislation. And then more conventionally, your tax increment financing, your reinvestment areas with the housing set asides. And then again, there's some overlap here, but considering fee waivers for portions of projects that are building affordable housing units. An example of this that I'll talk about when we get to the impact fee goal would be, you know, if a standard residential unit requires say a transportation impact fee of $200 per unit, whatever it is, maybe that impact fee for an affordable unit doesn't exist, or it's $50 or, you know, substantially lower. So the affordable units still have an impact on our system, but maybe there's some incentive there to help get those built. Moderate income housing set aside from CRAs. We've talked about this. I won't rehash it too much here. But again, just all the things we've talked about. We're anticipating a CRA at the town center, potentially the gravel pit sometime in the future. And then looking at those leftover EDA funds and using at least a portion of those for investment into an affordable housing fund, maybe even regionally. Lastly, the new goal, waive or reduce impact fees for moderate income housing. The city has the ability to charge impact fees for new development projects. We have the ability to do this. You have to validate what fee you're charging through a study. We don't currently do that. So right now, because a lot of our developments, 1-for-1, it's infill, the impact is already there. You cannot use impact fees for roadway maintenance. It's to support new roads and new infrastructure built. So when we get to a large gravel pit type project that could have, you know, many units, you know, we may be revisiting this impact fee structure. And if and when we do, this goal would support looking at that carefully to account for affordable housing units within those projects.
Do we have a impact fee table currently as a city?
We do, although we're not charging them. We historically have charged transportation impact fees and stormwater impact fees. Cities can also charge park impact fees, public safety, police and fire impact fees, a number of other things, and many do. We never have, but you know, when we look at these huge projects in the horizon that are in targeted areas that are certainly going to create an impact on public infrastructure needs and utility needs, you know, we may have to revisit that.
There's a lot of exposure for cities on impact fees.
Yes, you have to be very careful, and you have to use the impact fee revenue within a certain amount of time in a certain qualifying way. And if not, you have to return them. And that's what the study would validate before those are assessed. In addition to those were laid out because that's how we have to report. There are some additional recommendations that we have included in this plan. They're all budget permitting, but I think there's some value in adding these in here. A lot of these policies are geared towards new development. But as we showed, we have a lot of existing development built prior to 1980 and even earlier. So there could be some value in establishing things like a neighborhood improvement fund that would provide financial assistance to qualifying households for things, you know, like typical household repairs, maintenance, you know, general property improvement funds. Related to that would be considering expansion of the city's 50/50 program. This is a cost sharing program that the city, I believe, still has to, you know, if a sidewalk is lifted or needs repair and a property owner wants to do it, the city will subsidize the cost of doing that up to a certain amount. Again, in older areas, you know, some of those improvements may be needed more than in new areas. So having a financial tool there for qualifying households could really help that. And then again, can't stress this enough, engaging with everyone else involved in this housing challenge, developers, So private groups, nonprofit partners, state and federal level partners to share in the effort of providing housing options within the city, but also within the area. So that's the plan. That's a summary of what's laid out in the report. Again, required to be recommended to the city council by the planning commission and then adopted and reported by August 1st. I didn't leave much time for discussion here, but we can continue that in the business meeting. Are there any immediate questions on that?
Just a quick question about ADL or ADUs.
Yeah.
Is the setback requirements on those, is that similar to what other communities in the area?
No, not really.
You probably know who I'm referring to as I asked that.
I don't actually, but what we do right now is we say the size of a detached ADU is the same size you could build a normal detached structure, a shed, a garage, something like that, which is small. The height is like 14 feet, can go up to 20 with certain circumstances, but well below the 35 feet a house can be. Today, if I build a garage, I can build that structure 3 feet away from property lines. Our detached ADU code says, yeah, you have to keep it that same size, but your setbacks have to be at least the same setbacks as a new house would have to be. That's 8 to 10 feet away from property lines on the sides. It's 20 feet in the rear. So what it does is kind of preclude a lot of a lot of properties in the city from even pursuing that as an option. Now, internal ADUs are allowed everywhere. You can rent out a room, a basement, an above garage unit in your primary house. And that's available today, much less restriction there. You get a license, you get an inspection, and you're kind of good to go. But the detached ADU ordinance right now is challenging.
What is the current regulation for prefabricated structures or ADUs? Is that an allowed use? Is that just
Yeah.
goes through building?
We've always allowed manufactured housing, even as primary structures. It just goes through code review. It has to meet building code.
Perfect. Any requirement of the amount and percentage of on-site work versus off-site?
No, and actually, there was a state legislation, I think last year that's laid out this whole, it made, I think, building code amendments for how you inspect these prefabricated homes off-site. So no.
Great.
Any other questions for right now? We can continue when we get into the business session. Great, very great information. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a lot. I'm sorry.
No,
Thank you
it's
for your
good. No,
patience
I
as I
think it's
blabbed at you for 40 minutes.
It's valuable and good for us to be aware and understand it. So, okay, that's
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
okay. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.